And greetings. Happy Thursday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. I'm Steve Deace alongside Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre. We're brought to you by our friends over at BIRCH Gold. And apparently now we're not even sure that Fort Knox actually has any gold. That's just yet another thing that we are investigating and uncovering here. How much have we really been defrauded as the American people? There is a lot more uncertainty still to come. All right. There aren't any reckonings without uncertainty. So keep remembering, therefore, that you can use gold to protect your family's future. It's a safe haven in these sort of uncertain times economically. Thank you, Todd. And BIRCH Gold makes it easy to diversify a portion of your savings into physical gold. BIRCH Gold will help you transition an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold. And it doesn't cost you a penny out of pocket to do it. All right. Protect your future today. Text Steve to 989-898. Text Steve to 989-898. That'll get you your free info kit on gold and a copy of the Ultimate Guide for Gold in the Trump Era with a foreword by Don Jr. himself. Again, no obligation here, folks, just information. BIRCH Gold has earned the trust of countless Americans looking to safeguard their savings, and you can count on them too. Just text my name, Steve, to the number 989-898. That's text Steve to 989-898. Real quick, as a point of personal indulgence, today is a sad day for me. Well, I would say bittersweet. It's a bittersweet day, maybe as a better way to put it. We have our final, and Todd and Aaron, you guys are not there yet. You've still got a couple young ones at home that are of school age. Aaron, your kids aren't even of school age yet, so you guys have a ways to go before you get here. But today is the final parent-teacher conference that the Deace family is ever going to have. Now, when you homeschool the previous two kids all the way through, parent-teacher conferences are a little unique. All right. It's parent-parent conferences, okay? More like good cop, bad cop, all right? But Noah has been a student over at Des Moines Christian since started in the 7th grade. And today is the last time we're ever going to do this as parents, parent-teacher conferences. We'll never do it again after today. It's kind of a benchmark.
I haven't been to, nor has my wife, a single parent-teacher conference for any of my daughters since 6th grade.
Really?
Once elementary school was over, we haven't been to one.
See, I think that's, you know what? That's a difference between boys and girls, okay? I'm just telling you right now, if you're raising boys, don't ever let them know that you might not be completely and fully, not even, more like obsessed. Don't ever let them think, the boys at all. You can't ever let them think, I think you got this. You can't do it. You can't. You can't, because teenage boys don't got this. They never got this. They never have it. All right. So
pro tip, ladies.
Yeah. So when Paul says finish the race, in parentheses, Steve Deace added, and all the way to the end with your teenage boys. Don't ever let them think that you think they've arrived. And listen, Noah has great grades. We went in the fall, and his teachers have all said glowing things about him. So part of it is I also just want to hear that about my kid one more time. I'm not going to lie. I don't mind hearing from people I don't know how much they like my kid, right? There's worse ways to spend my afternoon. So I don't want to make it look like my motivations here are entirely altruistic. My name is still Steve Deace. Okay. So yes, by all means, please, I will gladly accept the hosannas for the child that I helped to raise. Yes. But in all seriousness though, no, when it comes to boys, pedal to the metal all the way to the absolute end. All right. Absolute. I remember the story I told you about when the kids were little, sitting on the couch, and Anna asked me, hey, I turn 18 in the middle of the school year. Does that mean I have to move out in the middle of winter once I turn 18? And I'm like, no, sweetie. I mean, I'm your dad. And, you know, as my daughter, I love having you here, and I'm happy to have you here as long as until you find a man that is willing to take my place and worthy of it. Right. And I just looked over, and Noah's like 2 or 3, man. So he can barely sit up on the couch himself. But I can read his mind. I already know. Batman Arkham until I'm 36. Nope. No. And I looked right at him. I said, but you, buddy, you might have to go in the middle of winter. Now, of course, he turned 18 last week, and I didn't throw him out because I didn't have to. okay, because he's handling his business. But you don't ever let your teenage boy until the race is finished, all right? Now, when the race is finished, Dad, you need to let him know he made it, right? Because that's another mistake too many dads make. When the son finishes the race, the dad doesn't let him know you did it. You're ready. You see what I'm saying? You passed the prelims using your family's track language. All right, you finished high. You finished high enough in the heats. You made it. You made it to your own race now. You got this. Go get him. You're a killer. Every son needs to hear that from a dad once they've made it to that point. Okay, and too many dads, frankly, don't do that, and there's disastrous consequences for that too. But what you also can do though is before they get to that point, don't even let them ponder that you're like, I think you're on autopilot. And you got, no, they're not on autopilot, and no, they don't have it. That's the difference. You're right with girls. Anna was basically mother henning her younger siblings by the time she was 14 years old, essentially. I mean, if we had any friction, it was her and Amy vying for who was actually playing the role of mom. Okay. Boys, no. All the way. My eyes are on you all the way to the end like a hawk. All right? You get out of line once, I will pounce. You have to go to the end with the boys, Todd. To the end.
Doge just discovered like millions of dollars that testify to what you're saying. Did you see what I posted last night? Somebody sent to me. The millions of dollars Doge discovered given to study Nintendo video games and how they, and I'm not kidding, how they infantilize men.
There you go.
I'm convinced somebody that knows Todd just invented that headline just for him.
He said back.
It's a belated Valentine's card to Todd.
Maybe he did it. He said Batman Arkham until I'm 36. It's happening. Yes. Steve's right.
Not in my home. It's not. No. But anyway, it is a big day. It's our last final day of parent-teacher conference. It's a big day on the show, too. Speaking of my oldest daughter, we're going to have her debut. It dawned on me, and this was just recently, and it was just confirmed yesterday. What was the term you introduced to yesterday? I had never heard.
ASMR.
You and I, neither one of us had heard this.
Never.
And apparently it's like a cultural trend on, major social media platforms, right? And we had no clue, right? We need to make sure we don't, and we can't turn our own, our own old age into its own idol,
Can't we?
We can, and we probably are in danger of already doing so, frankly. So let's not. We probably, the question is, pardon me, should we? All right. And so I thought every month we would just have Anna in every month just to do like a Gen Z checkup. What are our kids and grandkids? What are they into? And what are they talking about? Just as a public service to you and I, Todd, and we've got plenty of, Boomer and Gen X, listeners and viewers to the show as well with Gen Z kids and grandkids, right? And so I just think we're in danger of being willfully out of touch and like being proud of that, right?
We're not in danger of it. We're parked there and...
Yes,
that's my pumpkin spice land.
We're at the lookout point of out of touch. We went to Mount Out of Touch and we parked at Lookout Point.
My kids love it when I come up to them. Hey, anything going on in the chat snap today? It drives them nuts, which is why I keep doing it.
Yes. So once a month, we're just going to do like the kids say during the basketball games today, heat check. All right. We're just going to do a Gen Z check. Are we totally and completely out of touch? And Anna's going to come in and check ourselves before we wreck ourselves.
Or are we just being informed?
I think it's more about being informed. Okay. Do we really know what's going on? And then maybe, do we have any wisdom to add to the subject matter at hand? Okay.
Now, does the basic timeless Steve Deace rule apply that no matter how much gravity arises in a situation, if you don't care about it, you just won't care about it? Can we do that?
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
It could be hyper relevant, but as long as we don't care, we don't have to care.
It doesn't matter. If we don't care, it doesn't matter. Yes,
okay,
absolutely. Yes, that's part of the dude code, I believe.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's one. Yeah, we got to make sure. Why even have the dude code if that?
If the dude doesn't care, it doesn't matter. Yes. All right. Bottom of the hour, we'll continue Theology Thursday, and I think the portion of Paul's letter to the church in Rome we're going to talk about today, folks, in many respects, is among the most important passages in the entire New Testament. And it is certainly among the most applicable, for sure. And we're going to discuss it in depth here coming up at the bottom of the hour. But let's get it kicked off as we always do with Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by Fort Knox Revisited.
And we're going to go into Fort Knox to make sure the gold is there. You know that we're going to go into Fort Knox.
As Donald Trump on Air Force One last night said, the famous military installation adjacent to the country's largest gold reserves will be in the crosshairs of his administration. Trump signed an executive order late last night ending the use of taxpayer money for federal resources supporting illegal aliens. Under the order, federal departments and agencies must identify and end all federally funded programs providing financial benefits to illegals. It also aims to ensure federal funds are not being used to support quote-unquote sanctuary policies. J.D. Vance spoke at CPAC this morning.
I do think that we've had maybe more executive orders than CNN has viewers each night. So,
meanwhile, Trump has voiced support for a new Doge idea called the Doge dividend, which would send $5,000 checks to 79 million American households paid for by the savings Doge has garnered and will garner through cutting government spending. That would be 20% of their projected savings, while another 20% would be used to pay down the national debt. An interesting idea. Yesterday in D.C., now fired federal workers provided more evidence for why they were fired.
You want public execution of Donald Trump and Elon Musk?
Yes, please. I don't want to be here. I want to be in my lab focusing on my research. But I can't. I want to be building community with queer scientists that I have been proud to lead, but I can't.
It's official now. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has designated several Central American and Mexican cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, including Tren de Aragua and MS-13. International news. Open Doors is reporting 70 Christians were found beheaded in the Democratic Republic of the Congo in recent days. Groups affiliated with the Islamic State are suspected behind the brutal murders. In Gaza, a ghoulish scene unfolded this morning as Hamas gathered their supporters to celebrate the handing over of dead hostages. This would be the bodies of the 2- and 5-year-olds Kfir and Ariel Bibas, along with their mother. Learning Chinese today, today's phrase is, "We are not the same."
我们不一样.
Back at home, according to reporting from Sage Steele, the National Collegiate Athletic Association is trying to skirt Donald Trump's executive order protecting female athletics by providing a carve-out for dudes who feel pretty to compete during practice against real females. And finally, rogue judges continue to do their best to try to block the Trump administration's agenda. Trump has gotten some wins in recent days, thankfully, but the specter still looms large. We told you last week about the federal judge who ordered the Trump administration to restore web pages dealing with trans stuff on HHS websites. But did you hear about these stories? A Bush-appointed judge for the U.S. District Court in Siberia issued a universal injunction forbidding Trump from firing the 5th-floor janitor at the Department of Redundancy Department. Also, a federal judge in Washington, D.C. has ordered the Trump administration to start smacking itself in the face while repeating the phrase, "Why are you hitting yourself? Why are you hitting yourself?" over and over again. Judge Judy has issued a restraining order against Donald Trump for drinking Diet Coke. Trump is now banned from even thinking about Coke products, diet or not. A small claims court in New Mexico's Tularosa Basin has issued a universal injunction against the Trump administration's plans to fire Kyle, a blind Galapagos tortoise employed by the federal government to write interagency memos. When asked for comment, Kyle said, quote, "Ribbit, oh wait, that's what a frog says. What does a tortoise say? I don't know. What I do know is that this quote makes about as much sense as the federal government hiring a tortoise and a small claims court judge coming along to save my job. But somehow, this is more believable than a federal judge ordering the president to put web pages about trans stuff back up. But then again, what do I know? I'm a talking tortoise." And finally, Judge Reinhold of California has granted standing in the case of a lawsuit brought about by an illegal alien from the planet Zebulon 9b who is suing the federal government, saying he is the rightful president of the United States. The case is expected to be granted an expedited trial to take place later this month. And that's what happened while we were away.
Until like the fourth one, I thought these were real. Okay. That's because that's how insane it's become.
Yes.
It took like until the fourth one that I was like, oh, wait. This is just Aaron's snotty sense of humor. Okay.
I don't laugh out loud at stuff that I've written that much.
I love it when that happens. When I'm in here.
I do it all the time, and it really annoys my wife.
A small claims court judge in New Mexico's Tularosa Basin.
I know. We're in here every once in a while before you get in, Steve, and it's silent. We're just doing our thing.
Right.
And all of a sudden, like, Aaron will just be induced to humoring himself like that. It's fantastic. I did fail you this morning, Aaron. I want to, and you, Steve, and the entire population, because he was really harried this morning, and he asked, am I missing any stories? And I did end up giving one, but I can't believe I didn't give you the low-hanging fruit. Right after the Fort Knox stuff, how did I not tell you that? Where the gold at? I want the gold.
Oh, yes.
Dang it, Todd.
Yes.
Last night.
The Alabama leprechaun
Son
story.
of a gun.
Yes,
I had the
we
same
always look for
idea.
opportunities to
I had the
reset
same
that.
idea last night at like 11 o'clock last night. I was like, oh boy, I got to get the Crichton leprechaun in here. Crap.
I want to go. Where'd the gold at? I want to go.
Love that.
Aaron's Montage brought to you by the next chapter in our ongoing series here at The Blaze, The Cover-Up, where Matt Kibbe goes in depth on exactly what Anthony Fauci knew and when he knew it. And this latest chapter includes Dr. Richard Ebright, a leading molecular biologist from Rutgers University. He was really pivotal about a decade or so ago in trying to lobby the Obama administration for a time to outlaw gain-of-function research. Well, he is back now, tracing the funding, connecting the dots. You don't want to miss this latest chapter, and to make sure you don't, get $30 off with the code SMOKINGGUN, $30 off with the code SMOKINGGUN when you go to FauciCoverup.com/Dace, I should say. FauciCoverup.com/Dace. You'll get $30 off your subscription to Blaze TV so you don't miss this and all the other content we do just for subscribers every day. FauciCoverup.com/Dace. Use the code SMOKINGGUN for $30 off. All right, since I indulged my matter of personal privilege, rite of passage, I've got 3 things in Aaron's montage I want to touch on briefly, then I'll turn it over to you guys for reaction. And I'm just going to do them in order, Aaron, that you address them. First of all, Trump's executive order last night. We have been looking for an act of defiance to the courts. This is an example of it right now. So Trump's executive order, what he's done with this executive order is essentially what Abraham Lincoln did with the Emancipation Proclamation. It was an executive order that was meant to countermand, to directly conflict with the Dred Scott decision. What Trump is doing here with this executive order in denying federal bennies for illegal aliens is in direct violation of a precedent known as Plyler versus Doe. Now, just as there were ancillary abortion cases after Roe v. Wade that further attempted to codify the right to murder your child, the OG of all those precedents, of course, the mouth of the river, is Roe versus Wade. There have been other, Plyler versus Doe specifically, just like Roe versus Wade specifically dealt with first-term abortions, and then it was later expanded to whenever you want to kill your kid or you have a wild hair about it, go for it, okay? And we might even cut you a check and congratulate you while you shot your abortion. Plyler versus Doe dealt originally just with school children. See, this is how the spirit of the age works. Come up with the most absolute sympathetic argument you possibly can, or toxic empathy, as Ali Stuckey would put it. Make that point, get the camel's nose under the tent, man, and then take the crowbar, all right, to the rest of the door and just jam that thing wide the bleep open. Okay. And that's essentially what Plyler versus Doe did. Once it was, well, of course we have to, it's about the children. And so it was originally the first precedent that said people who are not citizens have a claim on your productivity as an American. And from there, various other precedents have come forth. What Trump is doing is he's directly going at Supreme Court precedent. He is saying that's not the law. We're not going to enforce it as such. And he is picking a specific fight in court to try to get Plyler versus Doe overturned. So this is the first act of judicial defiance. It's not as direct as just disobeying it, because it may develop into that. I would imagine that this thing's going to end up in a federal court here in about 10 minutes from now, right? And if the court says, hey, you can't go against Plyler versus Doe and these other precedents, we'll see how more direct the Trump administration wants to get in its defiance of judicial overreach and judicial supremacy and just pagan government. But at the very least, by their action, they have brought forth a case that will, if it gets to the Supreme Court, force it to consider once again Plyler versus Doe, which is the OG of illegal aliens have a claim on your work productivity and tax dollars. Number 2, on the Doge dividend, I think it's brilliant politics, frankly. You're creating buy-in, right? Hey, we found all this fraud. It's your money. We're going to give it back to you to some degree. My only question is, if we're only giving people back 20%, which I'm totally fine with, why are we only spending the other 20% and paying off debt? That leaves us with 60% of the money, right? 20 plus 20 is 40%. Does anybody know where the other 60% is going to go? Did they say?
I haven't seen anything.
Okay, because to me, maybe he just misspoke and didn't do the math in his own head. I have no idea, but to me, it just doesn't make. There's still 60% of the money they've uncovered that was wrongfully taken from you by your government. You're just giving people money back that they were frauded out of. You're giving them a dividend. It creates buy-in for continuing to further, push and prod and probe, how far down the rabbit hole goes. I think it's very smart politics. My only issue is, well, where's the other 60% of the money then? That's the only question that I have about that. But in terms of a political gesture, I think it's pretty brilliant. And one last thing with I want to touch on, then I'll turn it over to you guys so you guys have time to. This is yet the footage this morning out of Gaza from Hamas. It's just another reminder. It's not about Israel, really. It's about Islam.
Hear, hear.
The idea that a reconstituted nation of Israel creates some ultimate countdown clock under a biblical timeline it's not a relatively new idea to us in the year 2025. But in terms of the history of Christianity, which goes back 2,000 years before that, it is a relatively new idea. It is an idea that, by and large, really no one en masse in the church believed for roughly 1,700 years. So it's a new idea in the timeline of the church, although it's not a new idea in the timeline in which we currently live. And so all these debates we're currently having right now, is the church the fulfillment of Israel? Is it the replacement of Israel? Is the church and Israel on separate tracks of salvation? By the way, we'll get into all these themes more in depth, but is it around 9 or 10? Chapter 9 or 10 in Romans, I think Paul gets into some of these things, and we'll argue and debate them more in depth and what they mean and these terms mean then, and what previous eras of the church thought, okay? But this idea that, I hold to a historic Christian view that this iteration of Israel, while geopolitically significant, is not prophetically significant in God's timeline. Okay? That actually lines up with, again, what most Christians thought for 1,700 years, including almost all the greatest influences post-canon in the history of the church, all thought this. For the most part. I don't have an issue with that. My issue is when you conclude that sentence with this statement. And that's why I'm going to totally ignore the fact that Islam has been slitting throats of people that think or look even remotely close to me from literally 10 minutes after it was created. That's the part I don't understand. And I'm left... I don't like... I've been guilty of this as a right-winger, particularly of the Christian variety. Listen, I walked off a CNN live set for being called America's Taliban and have never been invited back, okay? So I don't want to just jump to, well, you must think this if you disagree with me, kind of either-or-ism, okay? But when I see a certain group of people consistently just refuse to acknowledge the savagery that unchecked Islam, and that's the key phrase there too, by the way, unchecked Islam. Because amongst the people that unchecked Islam is the most savage to are fellow Muslims. When the Ottomans formed their empire, they conquered all the Muslim lands. Who were living in the Muslim lands that they conquered before they attacked us, Todd? Who were the people living in all the Muslim lands they conquered?
Christians?
Muslims. It was actually Muslims. They conquered other Muslims first, then they came after us. So unchecked Islam isn't very kind to Muslims, let alone virtually anybody else, okay? Has a very savage history on this earth. And if your initial inclination is, but Israel, I don't want to do this. I don't. I'm very hesitant to do it, but I start thinking you're leaving me with only one alternative here. You just hate Jews. If you're unable to divorce your reticence of American foreign policy being somewhat based on a relatively new eschatological belief in the overall grand scheme of the church, but you can't divorce that from, and you might even be right. I don't know the answer. I don't know. And my curse is I've spent so much time studying what every side of these arguments think about the other. I should have just stopped with one side that was really popular, not studied any of the other sides, and then just stuck with that. Okay. When you study what the other sides think that aren't as popular, you're like, those are pretty good arguments. Then you study what the popular sides think about the unpopular sides argument. Those are counter arguments. And you realize I'm confused and I have no position on this. I don't know what to think. All right. But if you can't divorce that historic eschatological debate in the church from, holy crap, these are a bunch of absolute savages that cannot be allowed any form of footstool of legitimacy on planet Earth as long as we breathe. If you can't get to that point, then if no matter how many times they keep showing you, it's us, guys. We're the baddies. It's us, guys. It's us. All right? It's been us the whole time. There's no Phantom Menace. Just menace. It's just menace, guys. No Phantom Menace here. It's not a cadre cabal of hidden Zionistic Jews who maybe aren't actual Jews or Talmudic Jews or whatever other. It's been us the whole time. I mean, I don't know what gave it away. The curved swords we swung at your necks with, the buildings we bombed the smithereens. I don't know how many more hints we have to give you guys. You don't need any hints. It's just been us the whole time. If you cannot divorce an argument you have eschatologically to then take a look at who the real villains of this story are, then I'm left with I'm running out of alternatives other than, well, you just must hate Jews. I don't know what else to think. I mean, I guess it's possible a few of the synapses in your brain aren't wired properly and you just can't get beyond a particular thought. I mean, we're all human. It's a fallen world. I probably got some misfiring synapses as well that I should be more aware of. All right. So I guess you're disabled. Okay, but I don't understand. I don't. Because it's not about Israel. It's about Islam. And it's been about Islam from the very beginning. And for 1,300 of the 1,400 years of Islam, there was no nation, more than 1,300 of the 1,400 years of Islam, there was no nation on earth named Israel, and they hated us and they killed us and went out and went to smite us against the necks. Just the same. I'll stop there. Gentlemen, your thoughts on the 3 points I raised or anything else out of Aaron's montage you want to talk about?
Well, I think Aaron's montage shows the double-mindedness of man currently and why such schizophrenia is possible. When you talk about those two stories and the murder involved and the celebration of the murder and the parting of the murder, and then Western civilization comes along, and Aaron's bit at the end there, where it's persistent. But right now we're worried because Trump is Hitler. We are so far off target in terms of being grown-ups eating solid food. I think this social media age has reduced so many of us to children playing in our diaper, and that's something I don't know if we're necessarily going to grow out of. The longer we have got to take seriously the Trump is Hitler themes, which is what that bit is still talking about, the insane lawyering to stop him at all cost when there is real evil everywhere you look, including in your backyard. We got to move past that somehow. We got to break up that whole dynamic.
Going back to the Doge dividend, I did not realize that you were going to have the same take as I did, so I didn't tip my hand too much in the montage. But holy cow, that is a great idea. When I first heard that idea, I'm like, why? Just cut all the programs, give us a tax cut. And then the more I thought about it, you know what? How it's already popular, what they're doing with Doge right now. You want to cement that like generationally. Give people their money back immediately. And at the same time telling them, we've got more than enough money to give you your money back and pay down the national debt. I don't know if that's how they were thinking about this. I'm guessing if Elon Musk is the one behind this idea, probably is, because he's known for being really stupid and not thinking things through, isn't he? No, he's a genius. So holy cow, that is kind of a masterstroke in my estimation.
No doubt. And also, let me reset one more thing. Wrote a column about this, I think maybe just last week at the Blaze or the week before. To my former boss, my man, Senator Ted Cruz, no bailout for the NCAA at all. Do not save the NCAA if they cannot save the most basic fact of human existence itself. They don't deserve to be saved, and let the courts and all the various other tentacles pulling at the college sports, let them have their way with them at that point. They're not worth saving. All right, back here on the Steve Deace Show, here on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. We're brought to you by our friends over at Miracle Made. Of course, Theology Thursday has to be brought to you by a company called Miracle Made. But these sheets are absolutely phenomenal. Their speciality is temperature regulating. And they do that with a silver-infused fabric inspired by NASA. I know what you're thinking. Well, dude, I could regulate my temperature all night with aluminum foil too, but who wants to sleep in that? Now, these are also very luxurious, very comfy. At the same time, also very practical, very effective, no matter the weather. I mean, we have all 4 seasons in Iowa, sometimes at given moments of the year, simultaneously, all right? And these sheets hold up all year long. I can't recommend them high enough. I absolutely love them. Upgrade your sleep this year. Go to trymiracle.com/Deace to do that. And you can try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40% off. And if you use promo code DACE at checkout, you'll get a free 3-piece towel set while saving an extra 20% off as well. And in fact, Miracle is so confident in their product, and they should be. It's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep again today with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/Dace and use that code DACE to claim 3 free towels and over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/Dace. Trymiracle.com/Dace. And the portion of Scripture that we're going to talk about today, we're going to finish chapter 7 here over the course of the next hour of Theology Thursday. And I have to tell you, the first time I read through this as a believer, I mean, I just remember just like, because this was starting to get exhausting. All right. All right. And the thing that the enemy loves to do is make you feel like you're all by yourself. Nobody else struggles like you do. Nobody else has the same temptations that you do. He loves to have you isolated, because when you're isolated, you get in your own head, and that's, when you're playing to his advantages. And there is nothing new under the sun. And what'll happen if you allow yourself to be isolated as a believer, you'll get into what I've heard referred to sometimes as the give up, try harder cycle. Give up and try harder. There's this one thing one thing in my personality, or one aspect of my morality I just wish would go away. I'm going to try real hard over and over and over again. I'm going to white knuckle it. I'm going to do everything I possibly can. Okay. And this is not the same as this time of year. There are believers all over the world voluntarily giving something up of value to them to show solidarity with some form of largely benign suffering, in order to perform an act of worship in acknowledgement of the Lord who malignantly suffered for them. That's not what we're talking about here. This is now where you think that it is incumbent upon you, that even though Jesus died for you while you were his enemy, it is incumbent upon you now to not offer yourself up as a living sacrifice so that he can do great things through you, but that now you still have to prove yourself to him. You have to retroactively prove that you were worthy of what Christ did for you. Let me cut right to the chase. Spoiler alert, you're not. And nobody ever has been. So get into this give up, try harder cycle. And you'll try harder. I'll bounce my eyes harder. If it's lust, I'll become cheaper. If it's about profligate spending, I suddenly now am watching every coupon show, and I had an addition on my house made for coupons. Okay, you're gonna try harder. That gets exhausting. You end up not being able to do it because you never could. You fall, and then you just give up. And you become what the old Baptists call backslidden. And then you'll hear a message, or the Lord will speak into your life or something, and you'll get really convicted, and I'm going to try hard again. And then I'm like, okay, I can't do it. You quit, and you just do this over and over again. And you either end up burning yourself out, or you just end up staying permanently. No one ever stays permanently in try harder. Try harder is always a temporary stage. Like dieting. Take it from someone who went from fairly athletic growing up in terms of being involved in a lot of sports, not being all that great at them, but I played them all, and was very active, to then 400 pounds to now I just have quasi dad bod. Dieting does not work. Dieting is the same thing. Give up, try hard, give it up, try hard, give it up. Learning a lifestyle that is healthy or a discipline that you can install, that it may be tough to stick with at first because it goes against the grain of the hard wiring of your brain. But if you break through that, then you've reprogrammed things, recalibrate things, and your body's like, well, why aren't we still doing this? I've heard people that do the carnivore diet, for example, talk about when they break free of it to give them and just go nuts, like, and eat something and very, processed and carby, their body just completely repels that in ways that it didn't do it before they did carnivore, when they rewired their digestive system. You see, their digestive system is now, well, wait a minute, I thought we all agreed we don't know what MSG is. Stop putting it in our body. Why did you do that? And there's like a revulsion in their body as it's repelling it out of your system. That's because you installed a discipline. And then you broke from it because you're human and a sinner and fallen and not perfect. And then that body is like, performs that act of that check and balance on your conscience. And you're like, okay, I hate feeling like that. So let's at least make it a long time before we go back and eat that stupid stuff again. And you're back on your discipline. No one ever permanently stays in the try hard cycle because it just becomes exhausting. And you'll normally end up at that point apostate. When, Aaron, you were growing up, there was something very popular in evangelicalism known as purity culture.
Correct.
Okay. Now, let me tell you what purity culture is not. Let me tell you what it's not. Okay. Purity culture is not, I don't flirt to convert. I only date, in order if I think there's a possibility for marriage. Otherwise, why open my heart up to somebody that I don't think that that's possible with? It's not fair to them or me. Purity culture is not saving myself for marriage and hoping to marry somebody that does the same. Okay. That's not what purity culture is. That's just called morality. All right. So that's not like some special standard of legalism, or that was just kind of the standard we lived with pre-sexual revolution as a species for pretty much to 6,000 years. All right. So that's not purity culture, but that purity culture was, my dad gives me a ring at 13, a promise ring. It's essentially a thing that becomes performative in order to demonstrate that you have a higher level of righteousness than, frankly, you are capable of sustaining. And if I remember right, some of the leading guys in this purity movement who tried to kind of glom onto this fad and teach it to the church have kind of become apostates now later in life, Aaron?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you never permanently stay in the try hard. You eventually just give up permanently and just go apostate. So then what to do with this tension within us? And is God even aware of this tension? Is it supposed to be there? To that, I want to pick up starting in verse 15. And we're going to finish chapter 7 of Romans. These are the words of the man that wrote most of the New Testament. For I do not understand my own actions. I want to just let that just hover in the air. So this is the man the Holy Spirit has chosen to be the apostle to the Gentiles, people like us, non-Jews. To essentially be at the vanguard of opening up worship of Yah, of Jehovah, to the whole world for the first time. And he writes these words, for I do not understand my own actions. For I do not understand my own actions. What actions is he talking about? Paul goes on to say, for I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing that I hate. For I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. Now, if I do what I do not want, I agree with God's law, that it is good. So now it is no longer I who do it, but sin that dwells within me. For I know that nothing good dwells in me, that is in my flesh, for I have the desire to do what is right. For I have the desire to do what is right. For I have the desire to do what is right. But not the ability to carry it out. Right now, Alanis Morissette's warming up. Isn't it ironic? Don't you think? For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I keep on doing. Now, if I do what I do not want, it is no longer I who do it, but sin that dwells within me. So I find it to be a law that when I do right, evil lies close at hand. How many times have you heard me say, the devil is never like, it's so cool you guys got your act together, man. We're just going to move on to the next hood. Never happens. Never happens. And it never will. So I find it to be a law that when I want to do right, evil lies close at hand. For I delight in the law of God in my inner being. But I see in my members, meaning your flesh, your hands, your feet, your tongue. But I see in my members another law waging war against the law of my mind and making me captive to the law of sin that dwells in my members. Wretched man that I am. Again, this is the perhaps leading apostolic figure of the first century. And he calls himself, wretched man that I am. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. I once was lost, but now I'm found. And how does the John Newton refer to himself in that song? A wretch. Where do you get that word? Wretched man that I am. Who will deliver me from this body of death? Thanks be to God through Jesus Christ our Lord. So then I myself serve the law of God with my mind, but with my flesh I serve the law of sin. Notice how this is written in the present tense, as if to intimate this is going to be an ongoing conflict for you as a believer. You want to know when you've arrived? I'm going to tell you. Luther referred to this as the second baptism. Your loved ones put you 6 feet under, and you awaken eternity in here. Well done, good and faithful servant. That's when you fully arrive. That's when you fully arrive. That's why Luther also said all of the Christian life is a life of repentance. You're going to make mistakes because of this dynamic that Paul articulates here, and you got to own up to them, and you got to repent for them. You're going to blow it because you're at war not just with the world around you that wants to influence you wrongly. You're not just at war with an enemy, but you have an enemy within. That sinful nature that you were born with, it doesn't go without a fight. And it will bitterly cling to your fingers and the tip of your tongue and your eyes and your ears. It has to be kicked out of your soul, kicking and screaming. And this will be the ongoing war that you'll wage within your own soul as a believer. And I'm here to tell you today, February 20th, 2025, ain't nobody ever gone undefeated in this war. Nobody. The Apostle Paul is telling you here, I do evil. I don't want to do it, but I do it anyway. So there's no escaping this dilemma. That's why I think it was important the order in which this dilemma is presented. Notice it comes after Paul makes sure to talk about the purpose of the law. We can't just go on sinning so that God's grace abounds, right? Remember what I said about little Noah on the couch when he was a little dude? I could just see his wheels spinning already, looking for the easy way out, the path of least resistance, okay? So the recognition that this war, you will wage this war within your own soul on a regular basis, which is why Paul says I have to die daily. All right, what's Paul dying to? When he says I have to die daily, what is he saying? What's he dying to? This. He's dying to this. He's dying to himself. What does it mean to die to self? to every day try to put down and let the Holy Spirit in me put down that which is opposed to Christ. That has to die every day. We cannot say, therefore, since this is a perpetual dilemma we all will wrestle with as believers, that means we have a built-in excuse. If Paul writes unbelievers don't have an excuse, they know, right? Didn't we already cover this? Paul writes unbelievers know. They look up at the heavens. They can see there are eternal things. We know. Every time an unbeliever does something that God's law says is right or moral, they're a law unto themselves. So if the unbelievers have no excuses, how many excuses do you think God's going to grant the believers, do you think?
Whatever's less than that.
Whatever's less than none is how many excuses we have. Right? So this is not a cop-out. It's not a get-out-of-jail-free card. That's not what it means. All right? What it means is you don't ever win this fight until the fight ends. You just stay in the fight. You just stay in the fight all the way to the end. Like Christ carrying the beam of the cross all the way to the end. All the way to the end. To the end. Through nails in his hands, crowns of thorns, all the way to the end. You win by getting to the end. That's how you win.
So if you don't get to the end, is it fair to say you lose?
Yes. 100%. And then, of course, we'll have the debate we've already had 57 times. We probably don't need to have it a 58th. Did you lose because you lost it or because you never had it? And I don't presume we will, the three of us, despite the amount of undue pride we all have in our intellects, are going to settle this 2,000-year-old debate here merely on this platform of a show. Fair? But yes, if you don't finish, you lose. Correct. Now, why you didn't finish is the debate. But I don't know anybody that disagrees with the fact if you don't finish, you lose. You stay in the race. You stay in the fight. What Thomas Wayne says to a young Bruce Wayne in Batman Begins, why do we fall? So that we can learn to get back up. You keep getting back up, man. And sometimes you're like Rocky in Rocky 1, just taking a pummeling from Apollo Creed, and you're just trying to get to the end of the fight. But yeah, just get to the end of the fight. We'll explore this more on the other side, and we'll hear what Todd and Aaron have to say as well next. Stay tuned. And we're back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. I am Steve Deace, he's Todd Erz, and he's Aaron McIntyre, and you are you. And you can let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox by emailing us, steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. You can also like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. Follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Please subscribe to our new YouTube channel, where we had to start all over on YouTube because of all the censorship there after telling you all the stuff from 2021 that they now are admitting is true, but they demonetized me, canceled me, shunned me, and banned me for telling you back when it really mattered and you needed to hear it the most, and it could help you. And they didn't want to help you, which is they wanted to experiment on you and just treat you like a cog in the machine. So that's why they did that. So we have to start all over. You can help us there by subscribing to our new YouTube channel at Deace Show on YouTube. Again, that's at Deace Show on YouTube. And then if you love the podcast version, please, if you wouldn't mind, leave us a 5-star review wherever you podcast from. And thank you if you have. Hit subscribe, or if you're on iTunes, follow. And that'll make sure every time we do a new episode, it shows up in your feed every single time. Thank you for that too. And thank you to our friends over at Relief Factor. If you're thinking pain is just going to be something you have to live with, there is no getting around this when it comes to quality of life for you. I mean, it might be right. Like if you're 90 especially. We get old, right? These bodies wear out. It's also possible, though, that maybe you're given in a little too easily, that there is something that can be done. It's not just clinical, but also chronic. Too much inflammation in your joints that's causing all that lingering and pain and stiffness and achiness. That's something that was created to do something about it. It's called Relief Factor, created by physicians who can prescribe drugs. It's a drug-free supplement, though, that they wanted to come up with so that maybe instead of drugs, which risk some kind of, side effects, even when they're effective? How about something drug-free that goes right after that inflammation in the joints that's likely the cause of your chronic pain in the first place? Now, absolutely no guarantees here, right? But over the years, over 1 million people have tried the 3-week quick start at Relief Factor. About 70% of them saw such good results in 3 weeks or less, they stuck with the product long term. So why don't you see if you don't see a difference in 3 weeks or less when you go to relieffactor.com? Just $20 to see if you're one of that 70%. That's it. Relieffactor.com. Again, head over to relieffactor.com or call them at 800-4-RELIEF. All right, let's pick up where we left off. Finishing chapter 7 here in the book of Romans as Paul articulates the dilemma now that we start chapter 7 by going after the challenges of the unbeliever. Does the unbeliever have excuses? Does the unbeliever know what is moral and what is right and what is good? What standard do we hold the unbeliever accountable to? Okay. Now we are finishing this chapter with the challenge to believers and the dilemma that believers face now. And the fact that your flesh still wants what it wants, since you're still in this mortal body. Yes, your spirit is alive. You are born again in the spirit as a believer. Right? It's a little bit like, if you had a gas water heater or stove and the pilot light's been out. If you're an unbeliever, your pilot light's been out. You can still turn the thing on and everything, right? But it doesn't fully work the way that it was built, correct? Mm-hmm. Right? So, you can still turn it on and lights and stuff come on and it'll still do some things, but not necessarily what it was designed and meant to do, including maybe fill your house with gas and burn it down. So what happens when the pilot light is lit? Now you have a fully functional and operational battle station. Okay, so that's a good analogy, I think, for what happens when you become a believer is the pilot light is lit. All right? Your soul is back on. Your soul's back on. Okay, and working and being guided in the way it was supposed to be, because you're not an earthly being having a spiritual journey. You're a spiritual being having an earthly one. Unfortunately, though, you're still in this body. So the pilot light is on, the soul is on fire and alive, but the rest of the body's like, cool story, bro. All right. Anyway, remember those old haunts? Remember those old sensations? Remember those old feelings? Because we do, and we still really like those. And that war will wage until the end. And there will be good days and bad days. But you win the war by getting to the end. That's how you win the war, by getting to the end of the battle. And with that, Todd and Aaron, I'll hand it off to you guys. Which one wants to go next?
I'll let Aaron choose.
You can go first, Todd. Go ahead.
Well, you're in good company in terms of how you started that off, Steve, talking about when you got to this point as a early thinker or believer, whatever you were at that stage going through this, and you're like exhausted by it. And at the end, the cosmic stakes that you've summed up, and rightly, well, guess who agreed with you? St. Augustine. Scott Hahn's analysis of this talks about how St. Augustine wrestled with this and how his early writings are change from his late writings, because early on he was trying to figure out whether St. Paul, and other thinkers have done this throughout human history, was he talking about life before being saved or after being saved? Because he had the same sense of exhaustion. Is this what it means after being saved? Do I still have with this? Well, that can't be true. Early on, it was not clear what St. Augustine what side he fell on. He was really trying to sort through that cosmic math. At the end, he ended up right where you got done talking about. And Scott Hahn makes that clear in several ways of how he writes in other epistles, that it's clear he's talking about who you are after being saved, after being a Christian. Believers, this is Scott Hahn, having been released from the bondage of sin through baptism, still have to reckon with the mischief of sinful desires. The Christian is still capable of living according to the flesh by responding imperfectly to the grace of Christ. Even the apostle is beset with the frailties and inclinations to sin of Adam's descendants. When he wrote that, it made me think of the Lord's. What is depending on what kind of mood you're in, how exhausted you are by life, it can be the most exhausting or most encouraging thing the Lord ever said. When the Lord tells you in Scripture, they did this to me, what do you think they're going to do to you, to his apostles? I find great hope in that. It's just like that. He told us. He didn't lie to us. There's no scam. We knew. But if we're in a certain mood, we don't like that very much.
I've been in that mood a couple times.
Yeah. But even, even the apostles. So this is where, and now he includes to Scott, because Scott Hahn wants the best to check his math. He goes to St. Augustine talking about the same thing, and concupiscence in the baptized. And I talked about concupiscence a week ago, the tendency still to sin. St. Augustine, was not the Apostle Paul baptized, or had he not been forgiven every sin, whether original or personal, either of ignorance or of knowledge? Why then did he say such things? Indeed, this law of sin, which is in the members of the body of death, is forgiven by spiritual regeneration, yet also remains in the mortal flesh. Forgiven indeed, because its guilt is remitted by the sacrament through which the faithful are reborn. But it remains because it produces desires against which the faithful struggle. As I've said for weeks now, this is ultimately about the curse that we have from the garden. That curse is that we are rebels. Our baptism takes us back to the garden. The tree now of good and evil is in fact the cross. To live righteously is to live as Christ lived and died. That's what righteousness means, conformity to a standard or norm. But just like in the garden, we were given a gift. And we had a choice what to do with it, just like Adam and Eve.
So R.C. Sproul, did you want to say anything to that, Steve?
No, I mean, I thought that, I'm like, first of all, if you're quoting Augustine, most of the time, you're just flirting with me. All right. So, I just preach. I just let it rip.
Here's what R.C. Sproul has to say, starting in verse 15. For what I'm doing, I do not understand. That's verse 15. Paul expresses some confusion. He's perplexed, but not by some abstract theological mystery. He's perplexed by his own behavior. I don't understand myself. I just don't know why I do the things that I do. He goes on to describe a conflict that is rooted in the will. For what I do, that I do not practice, but what I hate, or that let me back up. For what I will to do, that I do not practice, but what I hate, that I do. Paul is not engaging in a philosophical discussion of how the will functions. He is speaking in concrete language that we can all relate to. We would like to lead a life, all of us, of perfect obedience to Christ, but we do not because there is conflict in our hearts between our general desire for obedience and the specific acts of obedience that confront us. There's also the strength of the temptation towards disobedience. That's why we cry, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. We are people of mixed desires, which is why the life...
Pause right there. Say that part there again. People of what?
We are a people of mixed desires.
Right there. That's good, yeah.
And I think even the ensuing sentence says, which is why life does not really become complicated until we're born again. Before we were born again, we had only one principle. The flesh. We walked willingly and happily, submitting to the temptations of Satan. Once the Holy Spirit has raised us from spiritual death, our lives become a battle between two jockeys, to use Augustine's analogy. Satan does not give up easily. The flesh does not die instantly. Life becomes complicated because we are involved in a war that penetrates the very deepest recesses of our souls and lasts until our glorification in heaven. Which we didn't even know was waging.
Yes. We didn't even know this was going on.
Yes.
Yes.
This is the universal experience among Christians, and it is what the Apostle Paul is talking about. I think we can park it there for a little bit, because I just want to say this. Happiness and joy are not the same thing. They're not the same thing. What is so evil and pernicious about the prosperity gospel that has been so ubiquitous, tainting and really painting over much of American Christendom. And for those of you listening, I just used air quotes because it's not really part of real Christendom. This notion, and I remember the very first time that I ever heard Joel Osteen. I think I was with uncle, just a special uncle in my heart and the rest of my siblings' heart, and I think he was recovering from a hernia surgery. And so, of course, that's the type of dude he is. Hey, I don't have anything to do. I'm going to have the nephew come over and hang out with me for a while. And we were flipping through cable television, and we settled on a channel where Joel Osteen was preaching. Again, for those of you listening, I'm using air quotes again. And I remember, and this always sticks out to me, and I'm guessing he probably says this once every sermon. Again, for those of you listening, air quotes. God just wants you to be happy. No, God wants you to be holy. Mm-hmm. That is the crux of our Christian walk, is that we're not always going to be happy, shiny, happy people. We're not always going to be that. But as long as we are fighting the battle, we will have joy. We will have joy. What is joy? To put it in my own words, and maybe you can put more flesh on this if you would like to, more meat on the bone if you would like to. What is joy? Joy is, I think, a form of peace that we have from knowing that we are in alignment or working to be in alignment with the way that our Creator designed us. Does that mean that does that mean that the chemicals in our brain are always going to be going off? The dopamine is always going to be going off as we're fighting this battle? No, it's not. We're not always going to be happy. But as long as we are fighting the fight, we will have joy, knowing that we are doing our Father's will. That's a difficult truth, I think, for a lot of people in cultural Christianity. And I will maintain that by and large, I would take cultural Christianity as being kind of the rule rather than the exception, rather than just overt paganism everywhere, which is what we're seeing increasingly in the United States. At least I think there's probably a better chance you'll hear a gospel presentation. But when it comes to cultural Christianity, too, it has its limitations. Cultural Christianity, as it kind of plays out in our culture, is that the message is, what can God do for us instead of what should we do for him, because of what he has already done for us. And when we answer those questions, then the rubber meets the road, and we discover life is not always going to be fun. God is not just a cosmic vending machine here to give us whatever we want if we do the right things or say the right prayers. That's when the life, as R.C. Sproul puts it, that's when life becomes complicated. We don't like complicated. We like you put 2 quarters in and you get a Coke out. That's not the Christian walk. It's never been and it never will be until not the jukebox or the vending machine analogy, but that's not the Christian walk, and it won't be, as R.C. Sproul said, until glorification in heaven. So I think that's maybe a tangent of this conversation that needs to be said.
No, that's very well said, because this strand of, at the very least, heterodoxy, if not flat out heresy, is rampant in America right now. It's rampant throughout many of what surmises to be or claims to be Christian television. It's even as much as I mean at this point, Trump is just like checking boxes of stuff Steve Deace, wish a president, had always done. Nevertheless, let us also not forget his own internal faith coalition is riddled with people who preach the heterodoxy that you were just discussing, Paula White included, okay? Because here's the thing that this does. You want to talk about a give up, try harder cycle? You turn God into a vending machine where, depending on how much faith you put in, determines how much blessing he pours out.
Yep.
And sooner or later, you're going to hey, there's 2 Coke machines. They both have, your name is Stu. Okay. Glenn Stu. Your name is Stu. And you think Coke Zero is a food group. There are 2 vending machines in a lobby. They both have your beloved Coke Zero. One of them is selling you Coke Zero for 50 cents. The other one is selling you Coke Zero for $1. Are you not going to compare between the 2? Of course you are. Maybe, and you might determine that maybe the machine that's charging $1 might be a better machine. The drink might be colder, and so that's why it's more expensive. You might put 50 cents in the machine because you discern that, well, why pay $1 when I can get it for 50 cents? But you're doing a comparative analysis of these 2 machines selling the exact same product, right? Mm-hmm. You're doing a comparative analysis. The same thing happens with this sort of word of faith stuff that Aaron is describing. Oh, well, my prayers were wrong. I didn't get the healing that I thought I was going to get. I must have let God down, and that's why my bills didn't get paid. And that other person must be better than me because they got their healing and they got their miracle.
On the outside, it sounds, the word of faith stuff, the prosperity gospel, it sounds so happy and so good and so uplifting and so hope-filled, but really, it is dark. It really is dark.
If you take it to its logical conclusion,
Correct.
It does. It does get dark. Yeah. And ultimately, it puts the onus on you. And not in the way that Catholics and Protestants argue about about the limits of man's responsibility. No, it puts the whole thing on you. As if you, by your actions or lack thereof, can provoke God. Because if God is just a vending machine, then where's the real power? The person who puts the money in the vending machine to decide which drink they want, or the vending machine? Who has the real power, guys? Is the vending machine dispensing anything if you don't put any money in it? No. So then who has the real power? The person putting the money in it. And in this case, therefore, who has the real power? You. You can't wield that power. You're not capable of it. You weren't meant to do it. And if you buy into the fact that you think you are, and you have reached a certain level of holiness and faith, that you provoke God to action, then you're saying, I'm God. I'm like God. God responds and reacts to me. Now, is he who is faithful in a little also therefore given dominion over a lot? That's what makes this so alluring. Is there some element of truth to? You get out of life what you put in? Yes. That's true in any relationship. Build intimacy in that relationship, and it's likely to be more successful than if you have not, right? What kind of relationship do you have with a vending machine? How intimate is that? Seems pretty transactional to me. There's no intimacy there. It's just all transactional. God's like a genie, granting wishes. You just didn't ask for the right ones. That's an incredible burden to put on people. I've seen reports in the past of these kinds of teachers literally rebuking their wives because their wives got cancer and got sick. Well, my wife must have just not had enough faith. That's why she died. It's sick. All arguments within the gospel begin with the premise of what Christ has done for us. They start there. That's the gospel, what Christ has done for us, not what we do for him. We can't do anything for him until he does for us. When we reverse that paradigm and we put the emphasis on people and what we do, you can have it be with a guy with a Just for Men VIP member who with $1 million smile and a trophy wife and washboard abs in Houston, Texas. It can be a guy who dresses like Hillary Clinton and claims he can heal only when you give 16 offerings, of course. But it's all the same. The scene in Joshua, my favorite scene in that film, is when Christ is just walking through the community one night and he comes upon an old tent-style revival. And the minister up front is a phony. And he's faking miracles. He's got the little earpiece in. He's got people eye in the sky up and above. They're calling on specific people who are going to do their part, act their part. Well, sitting in the front row is this beautiful young lady, but she's blind from birth. And she's believing she's coming to get her miracle. That Jesus is going to give her sight back. So she got there early to get a seat in the front row. As she's sitting there waiting to be called on, waiting to get her miracle. But since the entire thing is a scam and not real, she keeps getting bypassed. And Joshua, which is the Hebrew name for Jesus, Yeshua, which we would translate more literally Joshua, he's in the back of the room watching all of this. And in the midst of this show and tell He just walks like a boss to the front of the room, bends down, gets eye to eye with this blind girl in the front row. The whole show is still going on. The histrionics, it's all still happening. They're still taking offerings. They're still faking it, pretending everything else. The whole show is still happening. That's the part of this scene that is so powerful. The whole show is still going on. And he just walks to the front, gets down on one knee, bends down, gets eye to eye with this blind girl, takes off her glasses, and he heals her right there and gives her sight. And then when she says, "I can see," the show stops. Now he has their attention. And what he then turns and says to the fake up on the stage is about the most devastating thing he could have possibly said. Even worse than a harsh rebuke. Just a statement of profound, gut-wrenching disappointment that just makes you wish, I really just would have preferred a rebuke and a spanking. That's better than this. And he looks at the phony on the stage and Christ says, "You don't have to do it this way. You don't have to do it this way." Devastating. Absolutely devastating. We need to hear that more often, I think. We don't have to do it this way. I want to add something, if you guys don't mind. You want to add anything to that? Otherwise, I want to talk about something that Spurgeon said.
That was great.
Spurgeon writes about this passage we just talked about. "Oh, how often have men who have been struggling after holiness." Now, let's define holiness. It is not niceness, and it is not piety. Holiness means Christ-likeness, godliness, taking on the character of God. It does not mean politeness. It can mean that. Chances are you'll be a more polite person. It does not necessarily inherently mean more charitable. It can mean that. Chances are you will be more charitable. It doesn't mean niceness. It can mean that, and you'll likely become nicer overall. But this isn't moralism. It's not pietism. Holiness is the attributes and taking on the attributes and character of God, who is holy and set apart from us. And are there times that God is angry? And are there times that God is frustrated? Are there times that God is not nice? Yes. So Spurgeon says, "Oh, how often have men who have been struggling after holiness had to use these words of the apostle. Now listen to this part. The more holy they become, the more they realize that there is still something better beyond them. See, moralism makes you self-righteous. I'm better than you. See my furrowed brow. I'm in first place of the race. There aren't any places in this race. It's just pass fail. There aren't any places. You finish the race or you're finished. That's the only race. There's no gold medals. There's or bronze. There's just the race. You finish it or you failed. That's all there is. Moralism says the other. Oh, there are places, and I can promise you I'm among the top of them. But look what holiness does, Spurgeon says. The more holy they become, that's why it's important to hear that the Apostle Paul is writing these words. Hand chosen by God to take the oracles of God to the uncircumcised Gentiles of the world who had previously been largely shut out. And he says, I'm a wretch. I'm a hot mess here, basically. Because the closer we get to God, the more holy we become, it should actually make us humbler. Oh boy. Whew. Yeah, I got issues. The more holy they become, Spurgeon writes, the more they realize there is still something better beyond them, after which they struggle, but to which they cannot yet attain. So they still cry out, the good that we do not, but the evil which we would not, that we do. The true man, the newborn man, is struggling after that which is right. The real I, the immortal ego, is still pressing forward. It's funny, Spurgeon writing this in the period of time that he is writing this, by the way. If you know some of this terminology, how it's been applied in some other contexts. The immortal ego is still pressing forward like a ship beating up against wind and tide and striving to reach the harbor where it shall find perfect rest. The end of the race. There's no places. Finish or you're finished. That's the race. Finish or you're finished. Oh, what struggles, what contentions, what writings there are within men and women in whom the grace of God is working mightily. Those who have, now we're going to close with this. Oh man, this is good. There's a reason why they thought that maybe this is the greatest English-speaking preacher of all time. Those who have but little grace can take things easily and just swim with the current. But where grace is mighty, sin will fight for the mastery. Though it must yield ultimately, for there can never be any true peace until it is subdued. Now that's a sermon right there. That'll preach right there. Just as Paul says, should we go on sinning so that grace will abound? Spurgeon adds to that by saying the inverse, therefore, is also true. The more grace we've received, the more sin will fight and contend against us. I'm good. I'm leaving what I had to say there. You guys have any final thoughts in the last minute or so?
Well, I believe in what you and Spurgeon melded on there so much that I realized in my own life, and then because I'm lucky enough to do this job, how I had needed to condense it into a Christian mantra that I would say over and over and over again and apply it thematically as many times as possible because I wanted it to pack a punch. So, Steve, my level of agreement in what you and Spurgeon just said is exactly what I mean when I tell you over and over again, we are too comfortable.
And the message of real hope, not the false hope that we've invoked a couple of times here that is so prevalent, it's seemingly in American Christendom, is from Philippians. He who began a good work in you is faithful to complete it until the day of becoming a cosmic vending machine. No, until the day of Jesus Christ. That's the hope. That's the real hope that we have.
Amen. All right. You ready to feel old?
I always feel old.
Indeed. We dig that about you. Next. All right, back here on the Steve Deace Show. Hopefully you enjoyed that Theology Thursday. Next week, we're going to have an end-of-month grab bag Theology Thursday. We try to check in with you guys maybe like at the end of every month or so and kind of find out what we've talked about so far that has maybe triggered some questions, comments, or insults. And that'll be next week. And if you guys want to, especially in light of what we talked about today, I mean, I think this is one of the most applicable portions of the entire New Testament. All right. So if you've got questions, comments, or insults about anything you just heard or anything else that we've talked about recently, you can email us, steve@stevedeace.com. That's steve@stevedeace.com. Also, this part of the show brought to you by our friends over at My Patriot Supply. We talked about them for years. But even I was like, come on, man. And then I saw Western North Carolina. And I said, you know what? Yeah, come on, man, indeed. And I mean, I got a hold of my guy at My Patriot Supply, and I said, I'm in as a customer, man. I'm getting everything, getting it all, just in case. Because if that can happen, if it can happen to those people, man, who are like a community of MacGyvers, if it can happen to them, imagine how helpless Todd I would be in this situation.
Very.
Yes would have been okay. Yes would have been okay. Very seems like a pile on, although it's also very true. All right, so get the 3-month emergency food kit right now. That's 2,000 plus calories a day, including breakfast, lunch, dinner, even drinks and snacks. That'll be good for 30 days, stays good for over 20 years, so that just in case, that could never happen here, and happens where you are prepared with our friends at My Patriot Supply and their 3-month emergency food kit right now. Get a special discount as well, a $100 discount. And if you order today by 3 p.m., not only will the shipping be free, they'll ship it out to you the same day. All right, so preparewithdace.com is where you can go. Get the big $100 discount. Free shipping as well at preparewithdace.com. Once again, that's preparewithdace.com. So again, Aaron, what was that term from yesterday again? I still can't remember what it was.
I think it's
Anwar.
Autonomous, ASMA, autonomous sensory meridian response or something like that.
And it's all the cool kids are doing it these days, right?
Yeah.
And Todd, you and I had never heard this term until Aaron's montage yesterday, right?
Nope. I watched it from my memories just since you mentioned it like an hour ago.
Indeed, I couldn't even remember it myself. And so it got me to thinking, I was already thinking along these lines and I had already suggested this to Anna, but that's just another reminder. Yes. I mean, there is a certain amount of pride in just deciding I've learned enough. I'm good. And just, being willfully ignorant about what's new and trendy. On the other hand, the Blaze is kind of expecting us to be broadcasters here, right? Broadcasters here, and kind of know what's going on the culture, kind of have our finger on the pulse of things.
Fair enough, but I think all the pressure's on Anna. She's got to convince us.
She is. So once a month, we're just going to check in on Gen Z, right? Chances are, if you're listening to this, you're not Gen Z. You'd be a smaller part of the audience, and you're probably more millennial and certainly more Gen X and Boomer, right? And so Gen Z, that's your kids and grandkids. What are the kids talking about these days? Right? They got the internet on computers now. All right. So my oldest daughter, Anastasia, is here to help us, Todd, to make sure that we remain on the cutting edge and not the cutting room floor. Good to see you, Princess. How are you?
I'm doing good. It was a lot the other day when the montage was over and you asked what ASMR was, but it just kind of reminds me of our daily interaction. So it was a lot, but it was expected. So I figured that was coming the minute that he included that in there.
Frequently, Anna will send me things and what is this? I don't know what this means. I don't know what that is. Who is this person? Right.
Yeah. And
she just sends me stuff just kind of anticipating I'm going to have a reaction and know what it is. And I'm like, I don't,
yeah.
You're literally speaking of, I'm a man out of time. All right. So what's the first thing we need to know right now about what is going on that Gen Z is all hyped up about?
I mean, there are a lot of things happening. And I think that one of the misconceptions about, people my age and Gen Z, I guess you could say, is that we're not in the know, that we don't really know what's going on. And I would say that's false, that we do know what's going on. But you have to consider the fact that we know what's going on within 1 to maybe 2 minute clips on TikTok. Steven, my husband, and I were having this conversation the other day. We were kind of discussing, if you weren't my dad and he wasn't my husband, would we even be listening to any of these shows? And the answer was no. We would get a lot of our stuff from TikTok. And so that's really where people go for their news. And so, that's where I went. I had to sit there and watch videos. It was awesome. But that's where I went to, kind of see what I wanted to hone in on today. And one of the main things that's really been going on, and I'm sure you guys have kind of heard about the lawsuit itself between actor Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively, correct?
I've heard of the lawsuit. Now, I know who Blake Lively is because I know she was married
Ryan Reynolds.
And she's in the Green Lantern movie. That's how I knew who she was. Okay.
Yes.
She was on a popular TV show. I don't remember what it was called.
Gossip Girl.
Yeah, I was way too old. I'm not the audience, but I remember her from the Green Lantern film. I'd never heard Justin Baldoni. Is that his name? Baldoni. I'd never heard his name in my life until this lawsuit. Todd, what about you?
I'd never heard of him before.
Yeah, I'd never heard of him at all.
I have a wife and 4 daughters, and they talk, and so I overhear things. So
So they're in on. I know they got the tea.
I know enough about this just from hearing about them talking.
Did I say that right, Anna? They got the tea. Did I get that right?
I was just going to commend you on your use of the word quote tea.
Thank
unquote.
You. Okay, thank you. Now, to prepare for this segment, okay, because most months I don't want you to tell me ahead of time what we're going to discuss because it takes some of the fun out of it. So since this is the first time we're doing it, I agreed to let you tell me this time, okay? And I did something I don't typically do, which is prepare ahead of time. All right.
Okay.
And so how I prepared ahead of time is I watched a video that Critical Drinker did on this lawsuit last night. Okay.
Okay.
So I kind of have a general idea of it's a he said, she said, and she is claiming that he was sexually abusive, and Ryan Reynolds even came to the set to defend her honor and basically also remind Mr. Baldoni that he's a big star and Justin is not, right? And Justin is countersuing for hundreds of millions of dollars, saying that this is just all a smear and they tried to take over the movie and I wouldn't give them creative control. And so they're trying to smear me with Me Too. Is that kind of the gist of all of this?
Yeah, I would say that that's kind of the vibe. I think, though, and we see that a lot, in Hollywood and just in everyday life, women ending up, not liking something a dude said. And so they end up coming out and being like, well, that's sexual harassment. Or maybe somebody made a joke and they don't take that very funny or they don't take it lightly. And so then they, come out and say that, I was sexually harassed. And there's like different things. Like, for example, like there was supposed to be an intimacy coordinator like on set. That was a big thing. And Blake Lively came out and said that there wasn't one when actually there was one. But what I think makes this story of the lawsuit way more, in depth than what people might think it is the topic of the movie that this lawsuit came out of. And so the movie, It Ends With Us, is actually about, abuse, and actually ends up becoming an attempted sexual assault on Blake Lively's character. And so this movie kind of delves into like domestic violence. It's about a woman named Lily who Blake Lively plays, and she meets a man named Ryle who Justin Baldoni plays. Based
on like a real best-selling book, right? So like
yes.
a ton of copies. Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
And I've read the book and watched the movie. And, it's very like feminine powered, like woman power, kind of against like the guys, and she's a strong guy. And growing up, her mother was physically abused by her father, and Lily grows up, falls into that pattern. And in the book, she is sexually assaulted by Ryle, who she marries. And the book kind of, spoiler alert, the book kind of ends with her actually giving birth to her abuser's baby and then saying it ends with us. The cycle of abuse ends with us. Mm-hmm. And so it's a very like woman powered. I mean, the sentiment is good, but it's very, about feminism and all of that stuff. And so you would think that with that being the topic of the movie, being the topic of the book, and then with this lawsuit kind of coming out, the usual census is, well, since she's a girl, this guy is automatically in the wrong. But with Gen Z, like that's 100% actually not the case. You see very little backing of Blake Lively. Like, for example, on TikTok, I was going through some comments. So like, quote, I lost respect for Ryan Reynolds, never liked Blake. Now I don't like either of them. And one even was, they can never make me hate you, Justin Baldoni. And those were all both females that made those comments. And, Justin Baldoni is kind of like a known feminist. However, though, he's still a dude. And so automatically, usually in today's day, that would mean, okay, well, I've got to side with the white one
and a white straight one to boot, right?
Yes.
So he is without excuse. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's actually not what you're seeing. And you're mostly seeing people my age, backing him. And so it kind of made me, and I've seen this, over and over, even like as some footage has popped in, you even saw like Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds at the SNL reunion show come and kind of like hint and make a joke at it. And it's interesting though, because you see that people my age are actually siding with him. And even just recently, a YouTuber that both Steven and I enjoy, my husband and I enjoy, a while ago, he was reported as, having sex with somebody. He was like 20 and she was 17, but it was like within the age of consent laws in that state. And you actually saw, again, a lot of people who are my age siding with him instead of her. And so it kind of made me want to bring up this topic, because I kind of wanted to see what you guys thought. If you see any like changing of the tide, but I'm kind of bringing this to you guys as well, saying that I think that there is a little bit of a changing tides, in the sense of people might actually be looking into facts instead of just, looking at, oh, she's a girl, so she's always right.
So, Aaron, you're closer in age to all of this than we are.
Yeah.
Has your wife been someone that is aware of this story?
I'm sure she is. Yeah.
Okay. So, is are we seeing the pendulum swing the other way, essentially?
If nothing else, I think we might be seeing, at the very least, some exhaustion. My question is, though, with this entire story, I mean, Ryan Reynolds is more successful as a businessman than he is as an actor, and he's a pretty successful actor. My question is, why does he need all of this? Because by extension, Blake Lively shares in that success as well. Mm-hmm. My obvious question, why does he need any of this trouble to begin with?
And I can kind of speak to that a little bit because of like the conversation about this specific topic. There's been a lot of video that's come out about the behind the scenes of specific things that Blake Lively has brought up in her lawsuit against Justin Baldoni. And for example, you can kind of see her almost flirting with Justin a little bit. Like, for example, she says something like, because they're in a dancing scene, they're kind of like doing this montage and their characters are romantically involved. And so you see them kind of having a conversation that in the movie is muted. So it looks like they're romantically falling in love with each other. But in this conversation, she's like, I hope I smell nice. Like, sorry if I don't smell nice, and other things like that, where she's kind of flirting with him. And so there's been a lot of speculation that actually Blake Lively was kind of flirting with Justin. And it's clear in the video, he completely turns her down, even bringing up his wife instead, being like, oh, well, my wife or my wife. And so it's kind of been speculated that maybe she was turned down. He turned down her advances. So when she went to her husband, Ryan, to kind of bring this up, like, oh, he's been kind of, too touchy or blah, blah, blah. Then it kind of blew up because of that.
Todd, what do you think?
You looked at
Todd
me
was over there making weekend plans.
Half hour ago, you looked at me the same way, the same tone. We were talking about Romans 7. Baldoni. I don't know if I can pivot like that, man. I have heard. Listen, funny. I've seen interviews with Ryan Reynolds. You've actually heard me say this on the show before. Because he and Buddy from the Philadelphia show bought a soccer team in England. They had that show. I saw an interview with him with David Letterman. Ryan Reynolds is entertaining, but he's always entertaining in the exact same way, nearly. He's not much different as a person. He's not really acting. When he's doing Deadpool, he actually said, that's the comic book character I wanted to play, because he said it's basically me. Yeah. It is. Yeah. He likes to cuss a ton. And with him, it's while he gets away with it, it's just his natural style. But I'd rather hear Mark Wahlberg cuss than I would him. He just gets old, and it's clear it's a crutch for him, and he's just racked with daddy issues. He'll talk about his dad growing up I think he was a cop, but just a tough guy, and he was a sensitive boy, and there's a lot of that going on there. So I think that wrapped with the specifics, I had heard some of that before, that maybe she was flat out coming on to him. Maybe there's trouble in paradise in the Reynolds home, and she thought she was in a safe zone. She got in trouble, and now because they're so used to never having consequences and getting away with murder, she just goes back to Ryan and says, Ryan, this guy's trying to shank me. Let's go destroy him together. And okay, let's go do it. I think that's as likely as anything else.
And can I say one thing, Dad?
Sure, go ahead.
The reason
we got about 2 minutes.
The reason that I picked this topic wasn't even for, like hot gossip or pettiness. It was purely because when you came to me and you were like, oh, I want to know what's going on with Gen Z. One, this was a huge topic. But two, this is a topic where you might actually be seeing, people my age.
A paradigm shift.
Not doing the normal.
Yeah.
You might see them not being the ones to actually be like, oh, another case, another time that a dude sucks.
Yeah.
Like 90% of what you're seeing is everybody's actually siding with facts.
That surprised me.
If this is a breakthrough, then we might be able to use that for other things and with other things.
It's not so much what side you're coming down on, but the idea that in violation of who woke says is to automatically be believed, people are accepting there might be another side.
Yes.
When I watched the Critical Drinker video last night, that's what surprised me, is that this guy has survived charges and counter charges when even just a few years ago, I mean, he's dead man walking just at any mere allegation, let alone several rounds of them.
I have a question regarding what you just said.
Very quickly.
There's Taylor Swift fatigue. She is Taylor Swift adjacent. She was at a lot of those games. Is there fatigue regarding her?
Is that countering?
You can never touch Taylor Swift.
No, not Taylor. Well, that's obvious that people are getting sick of her.
But I'm saying for everybody is what I meant. Is for everybody. You know, everybody always makes excuses for Taylor Swift. So people are just saying, oh, she doesn't know, and to leave her out of it.
No,
basically.
But for this gal, whatever her name is, I've forgotten.
Blake Lively.
Are people just sick of her regardless of, is it more fatigue than truth?
She's not very popular with people, but she did have a hit TV show, and she does have a lot of fans.
She's married to one of the biggest stars in the world now, too. Yeah. So, all right, that is fascinating that on a topic where we have seen people just automatically assume one side's guilty and the other isn't, for whatever reason, right now people are willing to see nuance. That's good stuff, Anna. Thank you, sweetheart.
Thanks,
Anna.
All right, we're going to stick around and do overtime for Blaze TV subscribers. For the rest of you, we'll see you tomorrow, noon to 2 Eastern, right after Glenn Beck, right here on Blaze TV. Until then, Romans 8:28.